No one will ever understand how it truly was. It was unforgettable, true forbidden love stories. The afternoon light streamed through the expansive bay windows of our home, warm and gentle, enveloping the gleaming wood floors and the elegant drapes that Daniel was adamant about preserving. It was serene, as it typically was on weekdays while Daniel was at work. For a moment, I allowed myself to bask in the tranquility, savoring a cup of tea, while enveloped by the subtle murmur of the city just beyond the gates. After graduating college, Leo returned home a year ago. His choice had been a pragmatic one, aimed at reducing expenses and saving for graduate school, yet it had quietly altered the cadence of this home. Daniel had always commanded attention. A figure of authority, a keen intellect, and a visionary at heart. Still, his connection with Leo bore an unvoiced tension, a complexity I couldn't entirely decipher. Even after years of delving into the intricacies of human interactions. Why not ask Leo to take you? One morning, Daniel remarked, his tone airy yet dismissive, as I inquired whether he could accompany me to the opening of our agency's gallery exhibit. His focus was already consumed by the barrage of emails inundating his phone. He is youthful, vibrant, and consistently eager to assist. Leo had always been resolute. Whether it was accompanying me to events, assisting with grocery runs, or just being present across the kitchen table as I went through contracts, his relaxed demeanor stood in sharp contrast to his father's. At 23, Leo had matured. Standing tall and exuding confidence, yet still holding on to that subtle vulnerability he frequently masked with his wit. Initially, I perceived our relationship as a straightforward connection. A bond created from the lack of tension that Daniel appeared to introduce into nearly all our conversations. However, recently, I observed a change in the way Leo gazed at me. A flicker of uncertainty danced in his eyes, a subtle respect that had previously eluded him. It left me feeling unsettled. The discomfort persisted at the periphery of my thoughts as I washed my teacup and placed it on the counter. It wasn't merely Leo's gaze that had transformed. It was his demeanor. The way he carried himself when we were alone. Nuanced, nearly undetectable changes that an unobservant person might miss. He sat in the living room as I entered, mindlessly scrolling through his phone, one leg casually draped over the edge of the couch. His dark hair was tousled, and a hint of a smile danced on his lips, as if he had just recalled something amusing. The sunlight illuminated the contours of his jaw, and for a brief instant, I found myself captivated by the sight. "Alessandra," he said. His tone relaxed and inviting, the sort that effortlessly filled the space around them. "You have that intense expression on your face once more. What are you thinking about?" I shook my head, brushing the thought aside. "Just focus," I said as I began to arrange the magazines on the coffee table. "You're aware of the situation. You're constantly engaged in your craft." He reclined, his arms draped casually over the back of the couch. His gaze lingered on me as I fussed over the tidying. "Have you ever taken a moment to simply unwind?" "Rarely," I confessed with a grin. Yet his words held more significance than I was prepared to accept. "Well, you ought to," he remarked, his tone gentle as he inclined his head. "You have every right to." For a moment, the air felt denser, as if an unvoiced presence had settled into the space. His gaze lingered a moment too long, and I sensed a subtle warmth creeping into my cheeks. I hurriedly immersed myself in the documents before me, as though the pile of contracts on my desk demanded my attention without delay. "Have you had something to eat?" I inquired, shifting the topic. I was considering a trip to the market to pick up a few items for dinner. He grinned, a mischievous sparkle dancing in his eyes. "You're not planning to dismiss me, are you?" "Leo," I said, chuckling softly. "I mean it." "Yeah, I know," he said, standing and stretching, the hem of his t-shirt lifting slightly, revealing a hint of his toned abdomen. "I will accompany you." "Allow me to retrieve my shoes." It was this, his casual familiarity, the ease with which he slipped into the quiet corners of my day, that rendered him so challenging to categorize. I convinced myself it was harmless, that I was just letting my imagination run wild. Ultimately, I was his stepmother, not a young woman for him to direct those lingering glances at. Yet, regardless of how often I recited the mantra, the tension lingered just below the surface, stubbornly refusing to fade away. The market buzzed with its familiar chatter and the steady cadence of footsteps. Leo strolled alongside me, his tall and relaxed demeanor catching the occasional eye of passers-by. He bore the basket, adamantly asserting that I shouldn't lift a finger, while I countered just as firmly that I was more than capable. He appeared to take pleasure in the experience, trailing behind me as I highlighted the vibrant vegetables and exquisite cuts of meat. "You're quite discerning when it comes to your tomatoes," he joked, presenting one for examination. "I operate a modeling agency," I declared with a playful gravity. "Every detail counts." With a careful touch, he placed the tomato into the basket and smiled. "Is there anything more you'd like to share about yourself, Alessandra?" There was something in the way he pronounced my name, not Mom or any variation, but Alessandra, as if we were equals. Two individuals occupying the same space devoid of labels or expectations. "Plenty," I replied casually, sidestepping him to grab a handful of fresh basil. "However, you will need to put in the effort to achieve it." His laugh resonated softly, a comforting warmth that enveloped me, and I recognized, perhaps too late, that I had stepped unwittingly into his realm. The sudden proximity caught me off guard, prompting me to retreat a step, only to discover that his hand had lifted just enough to graze against mine in the briefest of encounters. My breath caught, and I managed a polite smile, redirecting my attention to the basil as if nothing had occurred. "Be careful," he said, his voice now softer, tinged with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "You nearly toppled the basket." I nodded, maintaining my attention on the produce. "Thank you for noticing it." Yet, as we continued forward, that touch lingered, a faint echo of something taboo. Something I was determined not to allow to take hold. Returning home, with the sun sinking low and casting elongated shadows over the house, I found myself in the kitchen, slicing vegetables for dinner. The steady movement provided a sense of stability, diverting my mind from the chaotic thoughts swirling within. Leo was upstairs, probably lounging on his bed, while Daniel wouldn't return until late. It was one of those rare evenings when the silence in the house felt electric, as if it were holding its breath. I hardly noticed the sound of footsteps trailing behind me until Leo's voice pierced the silence. "Calm. Looking for assistance." I turned, startled, to find him leaning against the doorframe. His expression relaxed yet his eyes focused. The setting sun bathed him in warm hues, and for a fleeting moment, I lost track of my words. "No," I said, swiftly, heading back to the cutting board. "I'm doing well." "Come on," he urged, stepping nearer. "Allow me to take action. You consistently manage everything with great attention." "You're charming," I remarked, looking at him, attempting to maintain a playful tone. "However, I have it all managed." He moved closer, extending his hand toward the knife I grasped. His hand brushed mine again, and I stood still. "Alessandra," he murmured, his tone shifting, taking on a richer depth. "Why do you refuse to allow anyone to look after you?" The knife slipped from my hand, touching down with a gentle thud on the chopping surface. My breath came in shallow gasps, and I found myself unable to meet his gaze. The words resonated as both a revelation and a charge, stripping away the layers I was reluctant to unveil. "I'm fine," I repeated, though my voice hesitated. Leo remained still, his presence radiating warmth and steadfastness next to me. And in that moment I experienced the delicate line separating us warping, moaning under the pressure of all that remains unspoken. The initial kiss unfolded in a whirlwind of feelings that neither of us could contain. It was during the photo shoot, a day intended to be polished, organized, and secure. All that I had dedicated myself to creating a life centered around. In an instant the foundation gave way. Daniel suggested that Leo think about modeling. Initially, he had dismissed it with a laugh. Creating representations. Who, me? I'm not exactly the runway type, he'd remarked with a self-deprecating smile. Yet, I could perceive the spark of curiosity in his eyes, reminiscent of countless others who had never imagined they stood a chance until someone dared to believe in them. It's not merely about appearances, Leo, I said to him one evening while we were seated in the kitchen. It's about assurance and flexibility. And sharing a narrative through your being. He tilted his head, observing me with a gaze that always felt too intense, as if he could see beyond my words and into the hidden spaces I kept concealed. Do you genuinely believe that? I nodded, determined not to let the intensity of his gaze shake my composure. If you're keen, I'm here to assist you in assembling. Prepare a portfolio and send it to several agencies. However, no pressure. Yet I believe you might astonish yourself. Daniel was excited by the prospect. If Alessandra believes you have potential, you should pay attention to her advice. She understands this field more deeply than anyone else. It'll be beneficial for you, Leo, an opportunity to gain knowledge and perhaps discover some direction. Thus, Leo consented. In the coming weeks, we collaborated to develop his portfolio. Initially, he showed reluctance, feeling anxious about being in front of the camera. However, there was something about the experience that revealed a new facet of his personality, one marked by boldness and a readiness to confront his insecurities. I instructed him on the art of posing, guiding him to relax his jawline and to maintain a gaze with the camera that was utterly captivating. He absorbed every word with remarkable speed, adapting with a precision that left even me impressed. The final shoot has been arranged to take place in my studio. I had a reliable photographer arranged and all was arranged. As I adjusted the lighting and assisted him with wardrobe choices, I sensed the tension in the air, an energy that seemed unrelated to the task at hand. I sensed his gaze upon me as I adjusted the collar of his shirt, his chest rising and falling just a bit too rapidly. You're doing wonderfully, I murmured, taking a step back to appreciate how the sharp white shirt contrasted beautifully with his olive-toned skin. Because I have the best teacher, he replied, his voice low and warm, the corner of his mouth tilting into a smile that made my heart stumble. As the shoot commenced, Leo truly came to life in front of the camera. His charisma was undeniable. And I noticed the photographer nodding in silent approval. When we finished, I felt confident that we had all the necessary components to submit his application. Thank you, Leo said as we packed up the equipment for all of this, for believing in myself. I dismissed him with a wave, aiming to maintain a cheerful atmosphere. You put in the effort. I just offered you a gentle push. No, Alessandra. His voice halted me in my tracks. You didn't merely provide me with a gentle push. You helped me gain a new perspective on myself. I faced him, attempting to dismiss the heat creeping into my cheeks. That's what I do. But before I could pull away, he reached out, his hand lightly grazing mine. You're more than just my stepmother, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. You have always meant so much more to me. The words lingered in the air, weighty and irrevocable. I opened my mouth to respond, to say something that would steer us back into safe territory, but then he leaned forward, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was both tentative and electrifying. For a moment I paused, suspended between the irresistible attraction and the awareness that this was a boundary we must not breach. Yet, as his hand brushed against my cheek, the grip of my restraint began to waver. I withdrew initially, my breath unsteady as I took a step back. Leo, I said, my voice wavering. This we can't, I know, he said quickly, regret flashing in his eyes. I understand that it's not right. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration seeping into his tone. I was powerless to stop it. I insisted that we concentrate on your career. Though my heart raced as if it might burst from my chest. This cannot occur once more. The tension lingered even after that day, yet we both immersed ourselves in the tasks before us. Upon receiving the news of his application acceptance and the agency's invitation to audition, the expression on Leo's face was enough to make my determination falter once more. He had always possessed a striking appearance, but now there was a self-assuredness in his smile that rendered him nearly unrecognizable. Following the audition, we lingered in the car. The silence thick with expectation. When his phone buzzed with the news of his acceptance, his joy was unmistakable. Those individuals. Yes, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. I made it inside. I smiled, the pride in my chest swelling despite everything. I mentioned they would understand my perspective. Suddenly, he leaned in. His hands clasping mine as he delivered a swift, joyful kiss to my lips. It was spontaneous and unreserved, a genuine overflow of joy. However, as he withdrew, his demeanor softened. The gravity of the recent events settling in. I started, yet I simply shook my head. Let's simply concentrate on cherishing this moment, I remarked, my voice softer than I had meant it to be. For the remainder of the drive, we remained silent on the matter, yet the atmosphere surrounding us felt electric, and I understood that despite my efforts to conceal it, we had ventured into unknown realms. With Leo's acceptance into the agency, changes started to unfold in ways that felt beyond my grasp. The connection we shared, once effortless and relaxed, had evolved into something unarticulated yet profound. Indisputable. Daniel felt a surge of excitement over Leo's development, frequently noting the significant growth his son had undergone. It's beneficial for him, he'd remark with that effortless grin of his. Your impact has been truly remarkable, Alessandra. Thank you very much. Those words resonated with me each time. Though intended as compliments, they struck me as a reminder of the delicate balance I was navigating, a balance I had already breached more than once. And yet, I found myself irresistibly pulled toward Leo, despite my best attempts to keep my distance. Our bond deepened in the hushed, cherished instances amidst the tumult of existence. Late-night conversations on the patio, when Daniel had gone to bed, and the world felt hushed. Visits to the studio where I guided him on mastering his angles beneath the intense spotlight of the camera. Even casual dinners, where his hand would linger a moment too long against mine as we passed the serving dishes. It was also understated, yet it seethed with a fervor that was impossible to overlook. One evening, as I stood by the large bay windows of the house, the city lights glittering like stars in the distance, I sensed a familiar presence behind me. I could sense it was Leo without needing to look back. His soft, deliberate footsteps lingered in my mind. You're always lost in thought, he said softly, stepping beside me. What is happening tonight? I looked at him, my smile faint and weary. Silence. Simply pondering. You're awful at lying, he teased, a playful warmth in his voice that eased the tension between us. I glanced back at the window, yet I sensed his gaze upon me. His presence was captivating, drawing me into a gravitational pull I had fought so hard to break free from. I suggested that you concentrate on your career, hoping to redirect the discussion from treacherous topics. There's another shoot scheduled for next week. I understand, his voice had grown quieter, taking on a more serious tone. Yet, I find it impossible to stop reflecting on our connection. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the window frame as if it could steady me. Leo, Alessandra, stop pretending this isn't happening. He interrupted, his voice firmer now. I understand you sense it as well. Don't say you don't. His words lingered in the atmosphere, dense and unavoidable. I turned to face him, the intensity in his gaze holding me captive. This is wrong, I whispered, though my voice was devoid of certainty. I am your stepmother. You're not my mother, he stated. His voice firm and resolute. You have never held the role of my mother. You're simply you. I shook my head, yet the tears stinging my eyes revealed my true feelings. Leo. This has the potential to ruin everything. You are a parent. My father doesn't see you, he said, his voice thick with frustration. That's not how I operate. He remains oblivious to the burden you bear, the constant weight of considering others before your own needs. I perceive it, Alessandra. I observe you. My breath caught at his words. And for a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of resentment towards him for the honesty they carried. Daniel was a good man, a loyal husband, yet he had never gazed at me the way Leo did now. As if I were the very center of his universe. I can't do this, I said, my voice trembling. Leo, we are unable to do that. Yet, as I uttered those words, he moved nearer, diminishing the space that separated us. His hand extended, pausing for just a moment before gently gliding over my cheek. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through me. And I despised how deeply I yearned for it. I'm not requesting for anything, he murmured, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. I want you to understand my feelings. I gazed up at him, my determination faltering beneath the significance of his admission. The truth could no longer be ignored. I attempted to distance myself, to persuade my mind that this was merely a passing fancy, yet the bond we shared was too powerful to dismiss. Before I had the chance to reflect, before I could intervene, I leaned in closer, my lips grazing his softly. The kiss began gently, tentative and laced with uncertainty, but soon it intensified as barriers fell away. For a fleeting instant, everything else vanished, leaving just the two of us entwined in a moment we could never reclaim. When we finally pulled apart, I searched his eyes for something, perhaps regret, bewilderment, something to align with the turmoil within me. Yet, all that met my gaze was unwavering certainty. This alters the course of everything, I murmured, my voice quaking. I know, he said, his hand still cradling my face. And I simply don't care. In the days that followed, our bond deepened even further. We exercised caution, perpetually vigilant. Yet the barriers that once appeared unyielding had nearly evaporated. Leo's representation. My career soared rapidly. The agency was captivated by his vibrant, dynamic energy. And he swiftly emerged as a highly sought-after figure for campaigns. Daniel was overjoyed, proudly sharing with anyone who would hear about his son's newfound achievement. One evening over dinner, Daniel said to me with a warm and genuine smile, "He's lucky to have you. You've served as a guiding influence for him, Alessandra." The heaviness of his words bore down on my chest, similar to a vice. If only he were aware of the reality. In my role as Leo's official representative, I collaborated closely with him, participating in meetings and shoots, discussing agreements and making certain that his professional journey was progressing as intended. Yet, each stolen glance and every accidental touch resonated like a secret murmured into the abyss. The evenings were the most challenging. I lay awake in bed, attuned to the soft hum of the house, aware that Leo was just down the hall. The urge to tap on his door, to surrender to the comfort of his embrace, was nearly overwhelming. However, I was aware of the dangers, and I refused to allow my vulnerabilities to ruin the life I had created. Yet, the moments we experienced, though brief, were sufficient to sustain the flame. A shared smile across the dinner table, his hand brushing against mine as he passed me a folder, the way he said my name, low and intimate, as if it were a secret only we shared. It was perilous, captivating, and completely irresistible. The ocean unfurled before us, its rhythmic waves caressing the untouched shore as the sun sank low on the horizon, casting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Daniel suggested that Leo and I go to this secluded resort, an extravagant gift he had received, but couldn't utilize due to his increasing work deadlines. "It's perfect," he had said, waving his hand dismissively, hardly glancing up from his laptop. "A break would do wonders for both of you and Alessandra. You'll have the perfect insight to assist Leo in connecting with the right individuals while you're present." I nodded, maintaining a calm facade, even as my heart began to race. I convinced myself that it was merely a journey, a chance for Leo to advance in his career, nothing beyond that. As we reached the resort, welcomed by the briny breeze and the gentle sway of palm trees, the palpable tension that hung in the air between us was impossible to overlook. The initial days unfolded in a flurry of bustling energy. I introduced Leo to the resort staff and other guests, gently guiding him on how to handle social situations with grace and finesse. He had an innate ability, absorbing my guidance and applying it seamlessly. During dinners, he would lean in and share a joke or an observation that would bring laughter, the warmth of his presence enveloping me like the sun. "You know," he said one evening as we strolled along the beach, the moon casting its silver glow across the waves, "you have an amazing talent for understanding others, sensing precisely what they wish to hear. You make it seem effortless." I smiled, gently pushing a strand of hair away from my face as the breeze began to stir. "It's not about expressing what others wish to hear, Leo. It's about ensuring they feel acknowledged and comprehended. All individuals yearn for a bond." "Is that how you treat me?" he inquired, his tone gentler now. "Help me feel acknowledged." I halted my steps, the burden of his inquiries pressing down on me. His gaze, so intense and unguarded, left me gasping for air. "Leo," I started, but he cut me off. "You don't have to answer," he said quickly, stepping a bit closer. "I'm already aware. You have always recognized me, Alessandra. Even when no one else did, our affair ignited that night, beneath the stars and the gentle murmur of the ocean. It was unexpected. Not something we had discussed. It just occurred, a gathering of all the taken moments and unvoiced longings that had quietly brewed between us for months." Leo kissed me first, his hands trembling slightly as they cupped my face, and for the first time, I didn't push him away. It was utterly irresistible, the way he drew me in with his sincerity, his profound desire to validate his worth. He absorbed every word I uttered, his gaze locked onto mine, as if each syllable I shared was a profound discovery. I imparted knowledge that extended beyond mere social techniques. I showed him how to observe people, how to understand them in ways that created deeper and more meaningful connections. I guided him in finding his voice, showing him how to embody confidence with grace. And when we were alone, when no one could see, he applied those lessons to me. He made me feel as though I was the focal point of his universe, as if I were the sole individual of significance. It was both exhilarating and frightening simultaneously. I understood it was fleeting, yet I allowed myself to succumb to the fantasy, if only for a brief moment. Upon our return from the resort, the situation became increasingly intricate. We both understood that the affair needed to conclude, yet neither of us could fully release our grip. Leo's career was thriving. He was arranging campaigns and shoots at a pace that outstripped our ability to keep up, yet he still carved out moments to seek me out, to linger in the hushed corners where our words would go unheard. Daniel appeared to be unaware, yet there were instances when I noticed him observing us with an intensity that felt a bit too keen, his face betraying no emotion. "You've accomplished remarkable things with him," he remarked one evening as we lounged on the patio, the shimmer of the city lights dancing in his glass of whiskey. "Leo exhibits greater confidence and a stronger sense of self-assurance. All of this is due to you." I managed to put on a smile, though guilt gnawed at my heart. "He has always possessed it within him," I remarked. "He simply required someone to have faith in him." Daniel nodded, yet a flicker of something danced in his eyes, hinting that he suspected more than he revealed. The relationship concluded not with a loud clash, but with a serene acknowledgement. We were both aware that it couldn't go on. I was the wife of Daniel, and Leo was his son. The lines we had crossed were indelible, yet they remained impossible to redraw. One evening, as we lingered in the studio after a late shoot, Leo turned to me. His expression heavy with a sense of resigned sadness. "I don't regret any of it," he said, his voice unwavering. "Not a single instant." "Neither do I confessed. My heart shattering even as I uttered those words. "However, it must come to an end." He nodded, yet the anguish in his eyes was undeniable. "You were my first love," he whispered gently. "You will forever hold the top position. And you'll always hold a unique place in my heart," I responded, my voice quivering. "However, this isn't our narrative, Leo. It was never that way." In the months that followed, Leo immersed himself in his career with a fresh intensity, pouring his emotions into his craft. He developed into the man I always believed he could become: strong, confident, and self-assured. Even though our relationship was shrouded in secrecy, I could sense in Daniel's gaze that he was aware. Yet, Daniel never faced us directly. Maybe he realized that it was a chapter that had come to an end, a mistake that had occurred but would not be repeated. Or perhaps he had faith in me to understand that I wouldn't allow it to tear our family apart. Ultimately, Leo evolved into a better person due to our shared experiences. He discovered the art of love, the beauty of connection, and the ability to view the world through a perspective rich in empathy and understanding. Even after our relationship concluded, the lessons lingered on. To me, Leo will forever remain a chapter in my narrative, a captivating and forbidden memory that molded us both. He was my pupil, my collaborator, my most alluring challenge. Even as we moved on, the love we once held would remain forever vibrant.